Welcome to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm your host, Hallie Roderick, and this space is for women rebuilding after betrayal. Here we make sense of what happened, find truth again, and reconnect with who you really are beyond the pain. Whether you're staying, leaving, or still in the middle, your story matters. Together, we'll explore truth, clarity, and the quiet courage it takes to rise from the wreckage of what was into the wholeness of who you're becoming. You're safe to be here. In the messy middle, in the rebuilding, and in the rising. Let's begin. Welcome back to the Rooted and Rising podcast. So glad that you're here with me today. Today we're going to talk about something that I know so many of you struggle with, and honestly, it's one of the most damaging aspects of betrayal recovery that nobody really talks about enough. It's this constant question that can run through your mind of, am I crazy? Am I overreacting? Am I just being triggered? Or is something actually wrong? And I know we've talked about triggers in a couple of the episodes so far, but today I want to talk about it from the context of reclaiming our discernment, because that can be really difficult in all of this. A lot of times you might be hearing from your spouse or other people that you're just triggered or that you're just overreacting. And so sometimes we start to doubt our own perception of reality. And maybe you might even start to sometimes feel like there's something wrong with you. So if that is something you can relate to, this episode is for you. And when I think about the word discernment, I think about rebuilding of self-trust and maybe even sometimes stopping letting everybody else, including yourself, convince you that every concern you have is just your trauma talking. I know that sometimes our triggers can feel like they're running our life or that our life is consumed with triggers. And here's the truth. Yes, betrayal creates trauma. And yes, you have triggers. But that doesn't mean that you've lost your ability to discern what's real. In fact, you might actually even be more attuned to red flags now, more than you ever were before. So let's continue some of our conversation on how to build trust with ourselves again. First of all, I want you to hear this, and I want you to know that I really mean it. You're not crazy. Your instincts have been right before, and they might be right now. So yes, betrayal trauma can make you hypervigilant. Yes, you might sometimes overreact, but that doesn't mean that you're wrong about everything. Think about it. Your brain and your body are trying to protect you. They learned that someone you trusted completely was capable of sustained long-term deception. That's not paranoia. That is your nervous system doing its job trying to keep you safe. And here's something else that I want you to hear that's really important. Your heightened awareness might actually help you see the red flags that you might have missed before. Things that you used to brush off or explain away. Well, guess what? You're noticing them now. And that's not weakness. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. That is wisdom. Often it comes from our painful experiences and the things that we've learned. But somewhere along the way, you might have been told, maybe by your partner, maybe even sometimes by your therapist, or by well-meaning friends, that you need to work on your trust issues, or that you're seeing problems that just aren't there, or that you're making everything about the affair. And when you hear that enough times, you start to doubt yourself and you start to think, well, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe I am making this up. Maybe my trauma is making me see things that aren't real. But let me be clear. Don't let anyone, including your partner, your friends, your mom, all well-meaning people, even yourself sometimes, convince you that every concern you have is just your trauma. Sometimes, maybe you're triggered by something harmless because it reminds you of the past. We talked about that in a couple of episodes. And sometimes, something's actually wrong right now in this present moment. So learning to tell the difference is one of the most important skills that you're going to develop in your healing journey. And that's what we're going to work on today. Because living in that constant state of self-doubt is exhausting. So second-guessing every instinct, every concern, every uncomfortable feeling, it keeps you stuck, and it can keep you small, and it can keep you accepting behavior that you shouldn't have to accept. So today we're going to talk about reclaiming your discernment. We're rebuilding your trust in yourself because you deserve that. And now, if you've been listening to my past episodes, you have been doing a lot of work on your identity, your values, your rights. And this concept of reclaiming your discernment is just going to build on that. So I'm going to give you some concrete steps to start thinking about, okay? The first one, and you might have heard me say this, you'll probably hear me say it again, is get yourself a tablet or a journal. Your journal can be your best unpaid therapist. Your journal can be one of the most impactful and helpful ways to process through things. So this is important, and here's why. When everything stays in your head, it's easy to even start gaslighting yourself. And it's really easy for your partner to rewrite history. And it's easy to lose track of patterns if they just keep spinning in your head. So start writing things down. Get a private journal. And when I mean private, I mean password protected if you needed to, or somewhere that you put it that's locked that nobody has access to. And you write down facts, just the facts, what happened, why it bothered you, what your partner said in response, and how you felt after the conversation. So here's an example. It's Tuesday night. Can put the date on it. Husband came home 2 hours late, said they lost track of time at work. I asked him to call next time. He said that I was being controlling and that I need to stop checking up on him. I felt dismissed. I felt like my concern wasn't valid. I also noticed that he seemed defensive rather than apologetic. Okay, see? Just the facts. This creates a record that you can look back on to see patterns. Because here's what happens. 3 months from now, when you're looking back, you might see that every time you express a concern, you get the same response. Deflection, defensiveness, and you being told you're the problem. And that's not being crazy if that's what's happening. That's a pattern. And the pattern tells you something important. Okay, so first step, write down the facts. Step 2, if you have to, is reality test with safe people. So eventually you're going to get to the point where you trust yourself. And sometimes early on, maybe you don't. So I want to be clear about this. Do not reality test with your partner because they have proven that they are not the ones that are trustworthy at this moment in time. And if there's an unhealthy pattern going of deflecting everything and telling you that your triggers are the problem, they're the ones that might be crossing your boundaries. So instead, I want you to find somebody that knows your history, knows what you're going through. It's really important that they understand betrayal trauma, that they can be objective. They won't automatically take your side or his side. They can help you distinguish, is this a trigger or is this a boundary violation? And somebody that has the emotional capacity to hold space for the complexity of these situations. Okay, so that might be a therapist or a coach who specializes in betrayal trauma, someone trained with the APSATS organization in the multidimensional partner trauma model. That's the gold standard for professionals in this world. Might be a trusted friend who's been through something similar, or a support group where you can get multiple perspectives. So someone's safe. Tell them what happened. Ask them, am I overreacting here, or is this a legitimate concern? And here's the key. You're not asking them to validate whatever you want to hear. You're asking them to help you see clearly when your vision might be clouded either by trauma or denial. Because sometimes you need somebody to say, yeah, that would bother me too. That's not just your trauma. And sometimes you might need somebody to say, well, it sounds like your partner might have handled that well, and your reaction might be a trigger. Let's talk about what got triggered there. Both responses are helpful. Both can help you calibrate your discerns. And so that's step 2. If you need to, process through it with a trusted friend or professional. And then step 3 is looking for patterns. This is where your journal becomes invaluable. So you have something to look back on. You have evidence of what was happening. And it's important that when you're writing those things down, that you do it as soon as it's fresh in your mind. So after a few weeks or months, you're going to start to see patterns. And then you can ask yourself, is this a behavior that I should be concerned about? Is this a pattern that's repeating continually? If you're bringing up the same concern every week and nothing changes, that is information. And if you're constantly worried about the same types of situations, ask yourself, okay, is this because of my trauma or because this situation keeps happening? Do I have concrete evidence or just a feeling? And feelings matter, remember that, so don't dismiss them. But I always like to distinguish between I feel anxious and I have evidence of a problem. Sometimes feelings are early warning signals and sometimes they're trauma echoes. You need both pieces of information. Both are important. So how does your partner respond when you bring up concerns? Do they listen and try to understand, or do they immediately get defensive? Do they take responsibility when they've actually done something wrong, or do they always make it about your trust issues? Do they help you feel safe, or do they make you feel crazy? Is anything actually changing, or am I just being told to trust more? This is huge. So if you've expressed concerns over and over and your partner repeatedly keeps saying, just trust me, but their behavior doesn't change, that's a problem. Trust isn't just something that you decide to do. I always use this analogy of trust. If trust were a 50-gallon drum filled with water, trust is lost in one fell swoop when the whole 50-gallon drum is dumped out all at once. And trust is rebuilt with consistent, trustworthy, safety-creating behaviors, one drop at a time back into the 50-gallon drum. So it's not just a decision that you make. Trust has to be rebuilt with consistency over an extended period of time. Step 4, I want you to remember to trust that I know feeling. Here's something I really want you to understand. When you have that deep gut level knowing that something's wrong, even if you can't fully articulate it, pay attention. Your subconscious mind is incredibly sophisticated. It picks up on micro expressions, inconsistencies in stories, changes in patterns. Body language is very telling, tone of voice, things that your conscious mind might not have fully processed yet. So when you have that feeling of something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it, don't just dismiss it as paranoia. Instead, just get curious and ask yourself, what is my intuition trying to tell me? What am I noticing that I haven't put into words yet? And if you don't have this in your personal Bill of Rights statement yet, you might want to add, I have a right to be wrong, and I have a right to trust my intuition. Those are in mine, and they are two important ones, because I actually have a right to trust my intuition until proven otherwise as well. I have a right to ask questions, and I have a right to be wrong. Sometimes later, and sometimes really later, maybe 6 months or a year later, you might discover that your gut was absolutely right. There was something off and you weren't crazy. And I would imagine if you look back on your experience before you knew the full truth, your intuition and your gut was telling you something was off. Even if you're one of those people that says, man, this came out of the blue, I never thought this would happen to me. I dare bet if you were able to really look back with honesty, that there were some things that you just didn't want to accept, that you wanted to ignore or not accept that they were part of your story or your reality. So I'm not saying here to act on every uncomfortable feeling immediately. I'm saying just honor it as information. Pay attention, watch, notice. Remember that your intuition is a resource. It's not an enemy. And the goal of all 4 of these steps is to help you develop what I like to think of as calibrated discernment. The ability to distinguish between this is my trauma being activated by something neutral, this is my trauma being activated by something that is actually problematic, and a present moment boundary violation that should activate my alarm system. All 3 of those are valid experiences, and they just require you to have a different response. So I want to give you a couple of language examples. I remember early in my work, my therapist would talk to me about a concept and I would say, yeah, that sounds really good. What does that actually sound like in real life? And she would never tell me. And it was so frustrating to me. I was like, I just need an example of what that language is. And so I don't have all the answers with this, but I like to give you some language examples. And I'm not saying use it word for word, but I just want you to hear what some of this language can sound like so that you can take what works for you, use it, tweak it a little bit to make it sound like something you would say, but just the general idea, I'd like you to have some language ideas, because I know for me that would have been so valuable. So at some point when you express a concern, you're probably going to hear, well, you're just triggered, or you're just hypervigilant, or you're overreacting, or this is your trust issue. So in that moment, you need to know what to say, right? So here's a few scripts for when you have legitimate concerns that are being dismissed. Okay, so let's say that your partner says you're just triggered. So you might respond with, maybe I am triggered, but that doesn't change the fact that you came home late without notifying me. Can we talk about that rather than my reaction to it? So see, this script acknowledges the possibility that you're triggered while refusing to let the actual behavior just get pushed to the side. Because both things can be true. You can be triggered, and they can have done something that wasn't trustworthy. Okay, so another example. if you're accused of being hypervigilant or controlling, you might respond something like, I might be dealing with hypervigilance in general, but right now I'm asking about the reason why you didn't notify me when you were going to be late. Are you going to address what I'm asking or keep focusing on my response? This script calls out the deflection directly. It says, yes, I have trauma. And also, you need to answer my question. Okay? So if the partner says, well, this is because you don't trust me, you might respond with something like, I'm trying to rebuild trust. That requires you being trustworthy. Coming home late without notifying me doesn't feel trustworthy. Help me understand why I should feel safe with this. So this is powerful because it puts the responsibility right where it belongs, on them to demonstrate trustworthiness, not on you to just blindly trust. Okay, so if you need to call out their deflection, they might say, everything with you is about the affair. And your response to that might sound something like, when you deflect instead of answering my question, it makes me more concerned, not less. So let me ask this again. And then you ask your question again. That kind of language makes it really clear that deflection is counterproductive. If they want you to trust them, avoiding accountability isn't the way to do that. It's not the way to get there. Now, does this mean they're going to just turn around and go, oh, you're right? Maybe not. And that might be the opportunity for you to disengage if they're trying to pull you in. We'll talk in a few episodes about destructive, manipulative communication patterns and how to get out of them. But here's just a taste of it. So if your partner is one of those that doesn't want to go back and address the pain, and they want to just move on and never talk about it again, and they might say something like, you just need to get over this. You might respond with, I'm working on my healing, but also, you need to meet my basic standards of honesty and respect, and those are not negotiable. If you can't meet those, then we can reevaluate whether or not this marriage can work. This is really a script when you've met your limits, okay? I don't encourage you to use the threat of ending the marriage unless you're really serious, because then if you use it as that and it becomes more of a threat or an ultimatum that you're not actually going to follow through with, it actually reinforces to them that you don't mean what you say. So I wouldn't use that unless you're really to that point where you are going to consider whether or not you're going to stay in this marriage, because it's firm and it's clear. It does put the choice squarely back in their court. But if you say that and you don't follow through with it, or you're not serious about that, it just reinforces that you don't follow through with what you say. So use that one with caution and when you literally are at your wit's end. So now I want you to notice something about all these scripts. They're assertive without being aggressive. Trust me, I know it's hard to be assertive without being aggressive when you're activated. I know that. And we can work to get there. These scripts also acknowledge your reality without apologizing for it. And they refuse to let the conversation become solely about your trauma when there's legitimate behavior to address. So practice them, say them out loud, because in the moment when you have all the emotions and you're activated, it's really hard to think clearly. So I'm a big fan of practicing scripts and having some scripts ready, because then if your brain has practiced them over and over again, you're going to be able to access them in the heat of a moment. So just some tips for you, some language scripts. And I want to just remind you that boundaries are always reasonable after betrayal. And if your partner frames them as your trust issues or you being controlling, that right there is a massive red flag that they may not be serious about recovery. Okay, so here's something I hope you leave with from today's episode, is just the reminder that you've been through something that really shattered your reality. And yes, that created trauma. Yes, you have triggers. And yes, you're healing. But that doesn't mean you've lost your ability to discern reality. In fact, like I said earlier, you might be more attuned to dishonesty, to boundary violations now more than ever. Your nervous system learned to pay attention, and that's not a flaw, that's survival wisdom. I often say that after betrayal that our ability to sense anything that's off is amplified and magnified. So don't let anyone else convince you that having trauma means you can't trust your own perceptions. Sometimes you're triggered by something harmless because of the past. And sometimes you're responding appropriately to something harmful right now. So learn to tell the difference. Trust yourself. And don't accept being gaslit about your own reality. You can do it. And if today's episode resonated with you, I want you to do something. Write down one time recently you were told where you were just triggered, or that you were overreacting, or that you just needed to trust again, but that you actually think something was genuinely wrong. Look at it honestly. Ask yourself the questions that we talked about today. Reality test it with someone safe. You deserve to trust yourself again. You deserve a partner who helps you heal, not one who uses healing against you. And if you're realizing that what you thought were triggers are actually ongoing boundary violation, that's important information. Don't ignore it. If you need more support, check out the show notes and ways to get in touch with me, ways to connect with me. I have an upcoming course that you can get involved in, and I would love to explore ways to have more interactions with you. So until next time, remember that your healing matters, your boundaries matter, and you're not crazy. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being here with me inside Rooted and Rising Healing. Remember, healing isn't a destination. It's a returning to your truth, to your voice, to the woman you were always meant to be. You have the power to rise at your own pace, in your own way. And when it feels hard, just come back to your breath and remind yourself, still I rise. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love if you shared it with another sister on the journey. And until next time, stay rooted, stay rising. You've got this.